organizational world in which they find themselves. And so what I meant by sprint silos is that we've seen situations where in organizations, client organizations that have organized sprints, agile methodologies, excuse me, as sprints, that each sprint is off doing its own thing, and they're not necessarily communicating very effectively with each other. There's limited amount of structure for that. Now, in some cases, that's dealt with by what some of our clients refer to as the scrum of scrums, if they're doing scrum, where there is participants in the different sprints get together and have these sort of cross-functional, cross-sprint discussions, and that does help. But of course, then that can create the possibility of the meeting expansion. So, you have to balance that of how much time do we want to spend trying to cut through the silo walls, if you will, versus remaining effective and efficient. And the small team-oriented focus of the Agile methodologies is sort of an exacerbating factor here. Next question is from Jeff. Jeff asks, can Rex elaborate on what reactive testing is? Yeah, good question, Jeff. So reactive testing is a term that I use to encompass all forms of testing where we are primarily going to react to the system as it is presented to us rather than try to do a lot of analysis and upfront development and design of tests and so forth. So James Whitaker's book, How to Break Software, includes a number of what he calls attacks that are very high-level logical test cases that basically say, if you think your system might contain a bug like this, try this set of steps. And that's a reactive approach. You would take Whitaker's book and you'd go, okay, yeah, that sounds like something we could have in our system, and I'll give it a try. Basically, it's any form of testing that's more focused on, as I said, reacting to what you're actually given rather than trying to anticipate things. Not very good at preventing defects, of course, because you are reacting, but it's very good at finding blind spots in your analysis and your set of developed tests. So I always recommend that as part of the process. Okay, I got a question from, sorry, not able to read the name here. Let's Darlene, maybe. Do Agile testers write automated tests or manual tests and then convert some to automated regression tests? It would be nice if you could automate all of your tests, but that's really not a realistic expectation. Some tests are inherently not automatable. If they require frequent human intervention to keep them running, or they require a human in the loop to determine success or failure of the test, then in these cases they are not really practically automatable. And in some cases a test might be automatable, but the return on investment of automating it simply isn't there because you're not going to run it enough times to repay the effort that you put into doing that. So, I think you have to, in any life cycle methodology, Agile or non-Agile, have a way of determining whether a test can practically and with a reasonable return be automated. And that's I think it's the same rules anywhere. Now, then the question is, how do you do the automation? And this depends a lot on what's required to make the automation maintainable. Now, we certainly have some clients who automate beforehand, and when I say beforehand, I mean before the original test execution for all the features, and are able to do that. Typically, that's because they're automating through the command line interface, and the command line is reasonably well specified, even if the exact behaviors are not necessarily specified. I think at the graphical user interface, you're likely to find that you're going to need to have sort of a retroactive thing where you test manually, probably for the most part, on the new features, and then automate the tests, the regression tests, as a sort of a test closure activity after the sprint is over. And this is probably going to require some kind of separate test automation team, perhaps, that is there sort of following along behind the manual testing parade, picking up the tests and automating them. And that then means that the manual tests have to be created in a way that they are automatable, that automation has been kept in mind. Okay, we got a question here. Again, I'm not able to see the who asked the question. Sorry, it looks like it might be Lindsay. It's a long question, so looks like a good one. We are refactoring our huge enterprise application and majorly in the user interface. The user interface automation becomes extremely challenging. What could be a good test strategy given a situation where we are not able to rely heavily on automation? Thanks. Oh, that is a really good question. It's such a good question that I'm not sure I have a really easy answer for you, I'm afraid. You know, the thing with the Agile methodologies, and indeed any methodology where there's going to be, as you say, you know, a lot of refactoring, and is that you're going to have a lot of change, and thus you're going to have really fairly high levels of regression risk. And you can and should try to manage that regression risk through automated tests at the application program interface, for example, with JUnit and CPP unit and so forth. But as I said before, Capers-Jones's studies seem to indicate that that by itself is not likely to be sufficient. You're going to miss too many of the regression bugs that way. So you're kind of thrown back into this need to look at things through the system level. Now, if you've got a command line interface, or you can glue a command line interface into your application somehow or another and get access to the business logic through a command line, that might prove more maintainable. You might look at there's a scripting language called TCL, or sometimes referred to as Tickle, which might provide an avenue for doing that. Of course, you could try to test at the top layers of the application business logic if you can get at them. If the system is architected in such a way that you can sort of tear off the UI and test right below that, then that might be something that's possible. So if you might look for points where there's a well-defined interface that's presented by the application business logic to the rest of the world above it, the GUI, and see if you can automate there. The other thing is, when you're doing automation at the GUI, make sure you've got really experienced people doing this. And a lot of people get thrown into the tar pit on this thing by doing a lot of learning on the job, and you can really design your way into a test automation disaster if you put people on it who aren't experienced. So if you're going to undertake a major automation effort, my general rule of thumb is that you need people with 5 years of test automation experience to do that. And that's consistent with an observation in a book by a guy named Gladwell called Outliers, where he observes that it takes about 10,000 hours to become an expert in anything that's really complicated. And as some of you have learned, probably to your chagrin, and I know I have as well, is test automation is really complicated. So best of luck to you. It's a very difficult problem that you're dealing with, but I hope that you have good luck with it. Okay, I've got a question